get more children to flip. This is a huge industry. Planned Parenthood went from 27 centers providing gender-affirming hormone therapy in 2016 to now being the second largest provider in the nation, and they provide it at all their clinics. This is how fast this has grown.
Friends, before we begin, just a quick thank you to this interview's sponsor, the new Patriot Brother X 2020 flashlight. One of the best things you can invest in for your home protection is a Patriot Brother flashlight. You'll never waste money on batteries again because the Patriot Brother flashlight is solar powered. It lights up the darkness with 800 lumens. There's a life-saving emergency strobe and 4 more unique lighting modes. And you can even charge your phone anywhere with the USB port. Other features include compass, magnet, rope and wire cutter, solar powered recharging, high and low beam LED modes, and an extended glass breaking hammer. This tactical flashlight is lightweight and durable. The holidays are fast approaching, and Patriot Flashlight wants to extend a 25% Patriot discount to all customers throughout the month of November for Black Friday. So take advantage of the discount right now and give someone you love the new Patriot Brother X 2020 flashlight. The link is below this video. Okay guys, let's begin with our good friend Corey from corysdigs.com, an intrepid investigative journalist and one of my favorites. Corey, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Sean?
Well, I'm doing pretty well myself. Thank you for asking. And check this out, Corey. I just discovered this last night. I had no idea that Rudy Giuliani, the right hand of the president, follows SGTreport on Twitter. And did you see what Giuliani just tweeted? Quote, "I discovered a pattern of corruption that the Washington press covered up for years. I'm also going to bring out a massive pay-for-play scheme under the Obama administration that will devastate the Democrat Party. Do you honestly think I'm intimidated?" Boy, it's nice to see some white hats out there stand up to these vicious demons, is it not?
I know, I saw that one. He had a few doozies yesterday.
He followed it up with basically a dead man switch too, saying, "Truth alert. The statement I've made several times of having an insurance policy if thrown under the bus is sarcastic and relates to the files in my safe about the Biden family's 4-decade monetizing of his office. If I disappear, it will appear immediately along with my RICO chart." Not playing games over there, I'm telling you.
Right? Stuff's about to get real.
Yeah, and you're not playing games either. You are going after the transgender agenda, which it clearly is at this point. Guys, Corey has written 3 parts about this so far. She's ready to work on part 4. Part 1 is called Exploiting Transgenders, Manufacturing in Industry. Part 2 is about medical engineering origins. And part 3 is about the funders and profiteers that are exploiting transgenders and pushing this agenda. If you don't think that the possibility is that this transgender agenda could creep its way into your life, look no further than Texas dad Jeffrey Younger, whose son James was under threat of having his penis cut off by his doctor mom, Dr. Ann Jorgulis, a pediatrician in Coppell, Texas. I want to play a soundbite from Jeffrey here in a minute, but first, where would you like to begin? This is such a huge topic, Corey.
It is a huge topic, and the reason I wanted to cover it is because I have a background in advertising and design and marketing, and I could tell that a lot of people were under the impression we're in the social engineering stage of this, of them trying to normalize all of this and pushing puberty blockers onto young children, telling them that they have gender dysphoria. And I could see that we're already way beyond that. We're in the sales and marketing stage. And so I wanted to go back in time and show, like in part 1, I show the whole historical timeline and the social engineering origins that kicked off in the 1950s. They've been building and manufacturing this industry for a very long time. So I can keep going, or if you want to kick into the Younger case, I actually cover that in part 4 that'll be coming out within the next week.
Yeah, let me play this clip. This is with credit to LifeSite News on YouTube. Exclusive dad fighting gender transition of 7-year-old son speaks out right before gag order. Now, get this, guys. A Texas jury ruled against Father Jeffrey Younger. Of course, he appealed that, and eventually he did win and has dual custody of his son. And now the son's mother, Dr. Ann Jorgulis, cannot transition this son unless the father agrees. But that is not what the jury originally ruled. And this was Jeffrey Younger's reaction to that original court decision.
Well, I was just completely shocked. I mean, we put up an email from Miss Georgilis to me in which she contemplates cutting the penis off my son. 20 minutes later, they go into deliberations, and they come back voting against me. I mean, the Texas that I grew up in, the Texas that I live in, if a parent did that, we're just going to give them to the other parent. We're not going to tolerate that kind of craziness. So it just tells you, I think, really how far our society has changed, and how much less Christian we are in the way we think about things now. And I hope it's a wake-up call to the churches to awake from their dogmatic slumber and step back out onto the streets of the agora, as Paul did in Athens, and start taking on these issues head on.
Yeah, isn't it interesting, Corey? Jeffrey Younger couches it the same way I did. This is a spiritual war. I mean, if we can't protect the least among us, God help us. I mean, better to be tossed into the ocean with a millstone around your neck than to hurt the little ones.
Absolutely. And these puberty blockers that they're pushing, look, this is a huge industry. I don't think people realize how far along this has come. This goes back to the 1950s when they first started glamorizing it by using Christine Jorgensen, who had been drafted into the Army during World War II and was from New York, and flew over to Denmark to have the first surgery, because at that time they weren't doing the surgeries here, transitioning surgeries. So she comes back, gets off the plane, and boom, immediately Hollywood embraces her. And, we have the New York Daily News saying XGI becomes blonde beauty. And of course, the New York Times was pushing it. And before you knew it, she was involved in cabaret and films and traveling around to all the major university campuses, advocating for transgender, and Hollywood and the news media was boasting her. So this was very well strategically planned. I have a whole historical timeline. There were a lot of people involved in pushing this agenda, which I call manufacturing and industry, because a lot of people think this is about, or just about, creating division and chaos and cognitive dissonance. And that is definitely a part of it, because they want their one world governance. They want confusion and chaos. They want to create socialism. So that is definitely all part of this. But the bigger part of this, from what I'm seeing in my research, is the money. It's just like when they started manufacturing the whole climate hoax, and that these people are in it for the long haul. So this stuff takes time to build, and it's like the same playbook in all of it. So they get the same players involved in pushing their agendas. They end up pushing it through legislation. They get all their people in place. So what people need to know is, right now, this has already been institutionalized. Like it's in the schools, the education system. They've already passed state law in 4 states. They've already passed legislation demanding that it be in the school system, LGBT history and training in the school system. They use discrimination as the basis for trying to get a lot of legislation through, such as, medical insurance and that type of thing, which the Obama administration hit hardcore. I mean, they hammered all kinds of policies around this to push it. So in 2014, they had removed this blanket law around Medicare not covering transition surgery. And then we saw this huge spike. So from 2000 to 2014, it had already increased 4-fold. And then by 2016, they saw this major 19% spike from the year prior. And it's because of this whole Medicare thing that they put through. Well, the Trump administration actually just reversed that this year. However, make no mistake, there is legislation trying to be passed everywhere out there. So people need to pay attention in their local states.
Let me ask you something about that. So does that play into, this is a fact I'm about to share with you. I think I've mentioned this once before, possibly with you actually, but I have a good friend who's a carpenter. We've known him for nearly 3 decades, just a great guy. His daughter identified as a lesbian in high school, maybe even when she was a little younger, middle school. And his daughter got involved with another girl. This girl is now, they're both 16. or at least they were when this happened about a year and a half ago. And at age 16, this other girl that my friend's daughter got involved with told her mother that she wanted to have the sexual reassignment surgery to become a boy at age 16. She got the double mastectomy, and
Wow.
insurance paid for it. That's the part that stunned my friend. And when he shared that story with me, it stunned me, because you know how hard it is to get insurance to pay for anything.
Oh, yeah.
But they
Yeah.
gladly paid to have a healthy 16-year-old female, a minor, they paid to have her breasts cut off in a sexual reassignment surgery.
And this is what we're seeing happening. It's really twisted. So, for example, most people don't know this. Planned Parenthood is the second largest provider in our nation of gender-affirming hormone therapy. And what that means is if you are 18 years old or older, you can walk into any Planned Parenthood clinic and say you want to get on hormone therapy. And you are not required. Here, I'll read this quote from them. It says right on their website, "You don't need to participate in therapy or provide information from a mental health provider to receive hormone therapy." And here's the thing. They also say, hang on, I got to find this so I can read it exactly. They also say, if you cannot afford this or insurance doesn't cover this, it says, "We provide care to everyone, regardless of your ability to pay." Now, they will also provide, at some of their clinics, they will provide a prescription. So they prescribe and they send you to a pharmacy, but make no mistake, they're doing their full exam, they're taking blood because they have to monitor the hormone levels. And on their FAQ page where it says, "Will I always have to take hormones?" Yes. In order to maintain the effects of hormone therapy, you'll need to take them for the rest of your life. So if they get a parent or guardian to consent, they can go in and get children on this as well at a Planned Parenthood clinic without ever having to see a mental health professional,
Right.
Which, let me just read you this real quick. This is from the American Psychiatric Association. Okay. It is a mental disorder. And it was called gender identity disorder, but they changed it to gender dysphoria because because of mindset, because they don't, and I understand that actually, they don't want a person to have a label with the word disorder in there, but they wanted to create it as dysphoria so that it still wouldn't necessarily impact certain insurance policies. So what they say under characteristics of the condition, for a person to be diagnosed with gender dysphoria, there must be a marked difference between the individual's experienced gender and the gender others would assign him or her, and it must continue for at least 6 months. In children, the desire to be of the other gender must be present and verbalized. The condition causes clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. But by all means, Planned Parenthood is just throwing the whole mental health to the side, and they're running this under the guise of reproductive rights, which federal government funds Planned Parenthood.
Right.
So we are technically funding this. And this industry is way bigger than people realize right now. There's already over 50 transgender youth clinics, just specific to youth. Boston Children's Hospital started the first one in 2007, and they treat ages 3 to 25. And it is, I have this in part 3. I cover them a lot in part 3, and quote what they say. And they give the illusion that if you go through hormone therapy and or transition therapy, surgery, that you will feel whole again. And that's what infuriates me, because 40% of transgenders have attempted suicide. And there's more that have had thoughts or attempted suicide after surgery than prior to surgery.
Right. And that's what I wanted to ask you about. Where does the mental health community stand on this? Why hasn't there been more of an outcry for some sort of legislation to be passed to intervene to prevent what I described happening to a completely healthy 16-year-old girl who was still a minor? Or even worse, what Dr. Ann down there in Texas wanted to do to her son James at age 7. I mean, if anybody needs mental health help, it's the mother who would push this on her 7-year-old son.
Right.
So where is the mental health community? Where's the outrage about this? Because it just seems to me and everybody listening that this transgender agenda is being steamrolled down the tracks against the will of the people, really. I mean, because what are we talking about? Less than 1% of the population that this serves, and yet they want to make it a human right. I think that's what they're trying to do. They're pushing this as a human right. Get this, court says Idaho must provide gender confirmation surgery to transgender inmate. So now people in prison are getting surgeries paid for. When those of us living in the real world, we don't get our surgeries paid for. If we need a kidney transplant, if we need, God forbid, something else, heart surgery, I don't see anybody offering to pay for those surgeries in the real world. So now they're making this a human right. It's just upside down world. It's complete madness.
It is. And what's really disturbing is the medical engineering of this all. So what they did, just so people understand how these puberty blockers came into play, back in 1969, they ran a study on, I forget the number, it was like 100 and something British girls. And they determined that, you know, a girl reaches puberty at age 11, and I forget the age they said for boys, but that if a girl starts to show signs of puberty before age 8, then we're going to coin this precocious puberty, and it's age 9 for boys. So what they did is they took something and it's you're not going to believe this, Sean. It's just, that was the one thing I was hung up on. I'm like, I got to figure out who coined this, who determined this was a medical disorder. I went through all, you know, Mayo Clinic, Johns Hopkins, WebMD. I went through all of them, and they all use the same language. So basically what we have is, if a girl gets her period a little earlier than her friends, or she starts to show breasts sooner, or if a boy's penis starts to enlarge sooner, or perhaps they get a little acne on their face, this is now considered a disorder called precocious puberty. So instead of just allowing the body to normally, you know, age and go through puberty at the time that is natural for it, we are going to go under vanity, which they have programmed society into, you know, everything is about vanity, that the clinical conditions of this, like I was waiting for all these horrific complications, you know, that it would harm the organs or the bones or something significant. No, it has to do with height, that they could have a quicker growth spurt, and then it stunts. So then they end up being a little bit shorter, you know, on the shorter end of the spectrum. And that it could cause emotional and psychological issues because of self-esteem. They're going to feel self-conscious because maybe they're growing a little quicker than their friends, or have their breasts are enlarging sooner than their other friends. And so they create this disorder around this. 2 years later, scientists at the Salk Institute and another group out of New Orleans come up with this, you know, find this gene. It's the GnRH gene that they synthesized and created analogs so that they could then later create the cure, which are puberty blockers.
You got to be
so these puberty blockers come into play in the early 90s. They started Supprelin, which was patented via the Salk Institute, Jonas Salk, who made the polio vaccine, by the way.
Can I make another? Yeah, I was thinking that when you said it. Can I make another connection here?
Yeah.
Recall Monsanto's bovine growth hormone. The BGH in the milk was causing girls to hit puberty quicker, and it was causing all sorts of issues that people caught on to, and eventually people stopped buying the BGH milk. But isn't that interesting? Monsanto's BGH was causing kids to hit puberty, especially girls, earlier.
That's very interesting because, you know, I dug up in one of my reports, I have an article from the Washington Post from 1984 where they had this huge influx of 3,000 people having precocious puberty in Puerto Rico. And they were looking into poultry and the CDC and the FDA, and everyone got involved in running these tests. And some of them were showing, oh, the poultry was infected, and others were, you know, with estrogen, high levels of estrogen, and others weren't. So they made this whole push over it, and they started pushing the term precocious puberty. I said, isn't that interesting? And in that article, they said, it is very rare in the United States. Fast forward 6 years, press releases are coming out saying 1 in 5 to 10,000 children have precocious puberty. So wow, what a spike that was.
That's so interesting. I just, and I wanted to ask you this too. I don't want to take you off track, but before we finish this interview, you got to tell people how you do your basic research. You can't possibly use Google. It's useless at this point. So I'd love to know what search engines do you use? Because I just typed in to Google, BGH causes early puberty. And you know what the first return was? The cause of precocious puberty often can't be found. And it's something from the Mayo Clinic. So then I scroll down and it says, the claim, hormones in milk cause early puberty, from the New York Times, ... But the bovine growth, the RBGH in the milk was definitely causing issues. But I just took you off track. But do you use Google? How do you do all this wonderful research? You cannot use Google as your search engine.
No, I do use Google.
And what else do you use? Because I found Bing actually gives you some decent results. But believe it or not, even though that's Microsoft related.
Well, here's the thing. So I sort of do it in reverse of how most people probably do. So I'm very intuitive, and I see how dots connect, and I see how bigger operations work. So I actually have the idea in my head of what's happening before I research it. So then I know exactly what keywords I'm isolating, and I will isolate it by dates. I will do brackets. I will do quotes. I will know what sources are trying to propagate it. So I'll go directly to those sites, and I'll do the keyword searches within their sites outside of Google. So I'm basically, it's like I already see the pieces of the puzzle. It's a matter of finding those pieces and putting it together so that I can show the story, or prove my theory, get the evidence to back it up.
Yeah.
But I do use Google. I use a ton of sources, but I'm going directly to a lot of websites too, and going right to their partners and the board and, tax docs and all that good stuff.
Well, it's just interesting, and I didn't mean to take you off track, so you can get back to precocious puberty. Of course, they have to give it a cute name, precocious puberty. It's just early. It's just so cute and precocious. It's early puberty, and we need to label it as a problem and give people medication because they hit puberty early. It's just madness. But I know. What does that have to do with the transgender agenda, though?
Okay, so here's the thing. So then what they do is if you go in, anyone can go into the Mayo Clinic and they can type central precocious puberty in, because that is what they've officially termed it now as the condition and the disorder. And you can see for yourself. I put some of it in my report, but you can read it all right for yourself. What they say, short height, stature, and possible acne, and it's just ridiculous. But then what they do is they say, like you had just read, they don't know exactly what the cause is, but they have observed that if a child has a brain tumor or an issue in their central nervous system, or all these really scary things, that can lead to precocious puberty. So what they're doing there is they're scaring the shit out of parents, saying, hey, if your child at age 8 all of a sudden develops acne, or if your daughter at age 9 or 10 gets her period sooner, you need to hurry up and bolt to the doctor because, oh my God, she could have a brain tumor. That's what they're doing with that. So anyways, now fast forward, and what they've done is while they were building the social engineering, they were simultaneously building the medical engineering to all this. And when the timing was right, boom. So they put this out in the early 90s. It was 91 or 92. Supprelin was the first one that hit the market. And it's an injection. And they basically inject them with hormones all the way up until they reach the age of what they've determined should be the age of puberty, which is 11 for girls. And then about a year or two later is when Lupron came out, which is by AbbVie, which is a spinoff from Abbott Laboratories. And that was manufactured by Takeda Pharmaceuticals, which is the biggest pharmaceutical company in Asia, which Bill Gates has given $40 million to. And I've got a lot of this under the funding and the profiteers. So you can look, the AbbVie connects to, they were Clinton, a global initiative partner. These people are all in bed together. Mm-hmm. So now we have this on the market. And as they're building the social engineering of transgender and LGBTQ and really pushing it everywhere and getting people in positions on boards, and all the billionaires and, George Soroses that are pushing the agenda and putting money into it are also putting money into the medical infrastructure. So they are now a profiteer as well. So it's this big circle. And now they get to the point where the endocrine, God, I can't remember the full name, it's in my report, but you had asked, like, what's happening with the mental health industry? Well, why aren't they stepping in? Good question, because this was licensed. Puberty blockers were licensed by the FDA for central precocious puberty. They were never licensed to be used for gender dysphoria in children. But the endocrine something rather society, I can't think of the name, and I think it's called, is it empath? All these various medical organizations and associations come together and they put these guides out and they say that this is a treatment plan for children with gender dysphoria, and we recommend using puberty blockers. So that gives the authority now for all the doctors and physicians out there to start dosing children with this. And then we've got them going into the schools teaching children that your genitals are not what determine your gender, and they're confusing the children.
Right.
And so what we're seeing right now is those two stages are already done. What we're seeing right now is sales and marketing. They're trying to hammer this home, get more children to flip. This is a huge industry. Planned Parenthood went from 27 centers providing gender-affirming hormone therapy in 2016 to now being the second largest provider in the nation, and they provide it at all their clinics. This is how fast this has grown. And I have no doubt, looking into the future in my mind, that in the next few years, Planned Parenthood will start to expand and have like surgical wings, and they'll start doing transitioning surgery there. They're already training tons of physicians in this type of surgery. And whereas the hormone therapy is a much bigger market right now than the actual surgeries happening, the surgeries are growing rapidly. So it is a really big industry that's been manufactured, and it's terrible. It's awful because they're exploiting the heck out of the transgender community. I mean, this is real. These people are suffering, and they need to work through their traumas. Most of them have childhood traumas that they can pinpoint that, started getting their minds thinking this way. It's already been proven. There's scientific documents showing that it's not some genetic thing that is causing you to be in another body. I know a lot of people have asked me about what's in our environment, or the fact that vaccines have some fetal tissue in them, and how are they messing with our DNA. And I have looked through those avenues. I have not found, on the studies that I've seen that were done on transgender specifically, they were not showing any sort of genetics or DNA that would, declare them or swing them over to be male versus female. So I can't really prove that. It's totally plausible in my mind because I've seen enough to know what these people do, and like what you were just saying about in the Monsanto product, So
Yeah, well, and here's the thing where I think you've really nailed it in part 3 here is the sales and marketing. If we talk about sales and marketing of the trans agenda, I think we need to look at shows like Good Morning America, right? Mainstreaming this stuff and bringing out little boys like the amazing Desmond. It's not just Desmond, it's the amazing Desmond. Yes. And the entire crowd cheers as this child, a little boy, dressed as a girl, as a drag queen, is rolled out to the audience and to the American people on Good Morning America, which just, I don't know if 10 years ago is long enough, but certainly 20 years ago would have been considered an aberration, an abomination. I don't think we would have ever seen that on Good Morning America. So it's definitely about the marketing of this trans.
They're creating a trend. They've been glamorizing it since the 50s, but they have now, done the marketing. They've created their trend, and they're glamorizing the heck out of it. And they're making it seem like this is an easy option, an easy choice.
And it's courageous, right? So he's brought out, the amazing Desmond is brought out, and he's told how courageous and how brave he is. All of these hyperbolic adjectives are chucked his way, and they're all wonderful adjectives. You're brave, you're beautiful, you're courageous, even though you might just be a confused little boy.
Right. And listen, I want to read something. So back in the 60s, Johns Hopkins had secretively started a little clinic where they were doing transition surgery. And it ended up coming out, they were ousted. And so they ended up shutting it down, I believe, in 79, which of course they have their gender clinic now. But Dr. Paul McHugh, this is recent, this is from this year, I believe. Dr. Paul McHugh, a distinguished professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences at Johns Hopkins University, just recently did an interview and told the college fix this. And I have more of this in my report. I just want to read a couple of sentences he said. He said, now remember, he is a professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences at Johns Hopkins. He says, many people are doing what amounts to an experiment on these young people without telling them it's an experiment. You need evidence for that. And this is a very serious treatment. It is comparable to doing frontal lobotomies. I believe it will be something like how we think of eugenics now. We will come to regret it when we discover how many of the young people that were injured regret it themselves. Yeah. And I mean, I did a whole 6-part report on eugenics, and Planned Parenthood played a big role in that, and they still are. They are literally, you go on hormone therapy, you're chemically castrated, you're sterilized, that's it. And for those that do the surgery, a lot of them afterwards are more depressed or suicidal. And I feel terrible for these people because they're really struggling. And now it's like, they're limited on who they go to, who they talk to, because psychiatrists, psychologists, universities, counselors, task forces at these colleges for LGBTQ, they're all pushing this agenda because the billionaires have gone into the education system and the universities, and they've created these task forces of these younger people that, carry on their agendas for them, whether they realize what they're doing or not. The level of brainwashing that has seeped through every institution and home with this is astounding.
And it's all by design. I'm stating the obvious, but to those to whom this information is new, if you found this show or whatever you call this little thing we have on YouTube, if you found this and this information is new to you, I want you all to understand that this is by design. This is not all happening by accident as a way to help children. This is being done to destroy families and to destroy societal norms. And it reminds me of INGSOC, Newspeak, right? In Orwell's 1984, Lies or Truth, etc. In your article here, you've got these buttons from Planned Parenthood. He, him, and his. She, her, and hers. They,
it's
them,
all part
and
of the
theirs.
programming.
Ask me my pronouns. So again, it's the fast tracking of Newspeak. It's the fast tracking of INGSOC. It's the fast tracking of destroying language as we once knew it, and destroying families and destroying societal norms. That's my opinion, but I think it's flushed out by the research. This isn't happening by accident to help children. This is happening on purpose to destroy families and societal norms.
Right. It's like Gender X. They created a third gender. So we now have states that are using this on driver's licenses, state ID cards, birth certificates. In some places, transgenders can go back and change their birth certificates to male or female, or they can switch it to Gender X. I mean, and that, think about that, on driver's licenses and state ID cards. So they're visually hammering this into people's minds that we now have a third gender. It's ludicrous. And, I have this tweet and it was fantastic because I just saw last night that Tucker actually covered this, and I'm glad he did. Because this is, I've been tracking, tweets and information on this for months, and the ACLU comes out with, there's no one way to be a man. Men who get their periods are men. Men who get pregnant and give birth are men. Trans and non-binary men belong. International Men's Day. I mean, this is the level of insanity that they're trying to put out there.
And I think that's the best word for it. It is insanity. It is like, here's the thing. They like to talk about anybody who questions the safety and efficacy of vaccines as being a science denier, even though the pharmaceutical companies don't do any testing for safety and efficacy of the stuff they demand we put in our children in the form of these vaccines, which I, by the way, call chemical weapons delivery systems. But
Mhm.
you're right, it's pure insanity. And for as much as I've maligned Joe Rogan for turning tail on so many of the things he used to stand for, but one thing I'll give him credit for is he'll take these people on head on as it pertains to men getting reassigned as women or identifying as women and then participating in all female sports and destroying world records, setting new world records for weightlifting and boxing. It's absolute lunacy because they are still biologically men. And if you say that on Twitter, you'll get banned for life.
Oh, I know. I know. The level of shadow banning and the attacks to my site are off the charts right now. I mean, they have been for quite a while, but I can tell you this one struck a nerve. And here's the thing, Sean, it's not just happening in our country. And that's when you know there is a playbook and there is an agenda. When the timelines coincide and it's happening in other countries, and I didn't do a real deep dive on this because I didn't need to, but like Australia, the United Kingdom, Canada, they're right in sync. And I just found, this will be in part 4, but I just found this. Let me just read these couple of sentences here. In the United Kingdom, where there is one gender clinic for pediatrics, Tavistock GIDS, GIDS, I think that's an acronym, the number of patients have grown exponentially over the last decade. In 2009 to 2010, there were 32 girls and 40 boys treated at the clinic. In 2018 to 2019, that figure had grown to 624 boys and 1,740 girls. A full 20% of these patients were under the age of 12, with 52 children age 6 or below. So this is something that is being pushed globally, which tells you right there, this is, all UN agenda, one world governance, socialism, all of it. It all plays together. But never forget, this is a money-making machine. They have manufactured this industry and are exploiting the heck out of a real transgender community that are suffering and need help. And they are targeting children hard right now. Mm-hmm. So when the heck the FDA is going to step in on this, or, oh, that's what I wanted to tell you. Okay, so I just found this. This will be in part 4. I'm going to try and reach out to her too. So Rep. Ginny Earhart she's a Republican out of Marietta, Georgia. She just announced a few weeks ago in a press release that she intends to introduce the Vulnerable Child Protection Act in the 2020 legislative section. If passed, the act would make it a felony for doctors to perform certain medical procedures on children, such as sterilization, mastectomy, vasectomy, castration, and other forms of genital mutilation. It would also make it a felony to prescribe puberty-blocking drugs and cross-sex hormone therapy. So everybody listening to this, if you understand what's going on and see the bigger picture, we need to get behind her and support her in this and try and get as many eyes on this and as vocal as we can, because this could set a serious precedent if she can get this bill through.
Yeah. All right. That's fantastic. It's just insane. It's upside down world. And that's why when Planned Parenthood talks about abortion, they call it women's health. I'm not sure how aborting a viable baby in the 9th month in the state of New York can be deemed solely women's health.
Right.
When it really is the murder of one of the 2 people involved in the procedure. It's just beyond the pale, and it's upside down world. It's all by design. All right, tell us about part 4, exploiting transgenders, part 4, manufacturing a reality with dollar signs after it. So just explain that briefly, and when do you think you'll have that out?
Yeah, so generally I would put a lot of the evidence of the social engineering at the front end of a report. I chose to do it at the end of this because people are really hung up on that part of it, and I wanted them to understand how far back that engineering began and how seeded it already is into this country. So I wanted to take them through the timeline of that and show them the medical engineering, and then show them who's profiting and who's funding this agenda. So the last part of the report has all kinds of good information packed in there, evidence, proof, showing where we're at right now, different ways they're pushing it right now to drive, to market it, essentially, to bring in sales. They are trying to increase. Look, here's the obvious. With this many people and this many, billionaires, elites, and agencies, organizations, presidents, Clinton, Obama, and Hillary Clinton, they all pushed this agenda through hard. Would they put this much energy and effort and money and time into pushing this if they weren't trying to monetize it? We're talking about less than 1% of the population was identifying as transgender. Who knows what that has increased to now, because they have been doing their job quite successfully. So I basically, kind of wrap up the whole thing in part 4, showing where we're at right now and how dangerous this has become. And just one statistic I didn't mention earlier, I really spent a lot of time focusing on the Lupron meds because they purport to be the #1 prescriber of puberty blockers. And I found several connections to people such as, the Clintons and Bill and Melinda Gates and others. And Google, they partnered with Google too. And they have 25,000 adverse reports with 1,500 deaths. Now, that's a combination because they have 3 medicines. There's like Lupron Depot, and Lupron Depot Ped, which one treats prostate cancer, one treats endometriosis, and the other is puberty blockers. But they're very similar makeup. So that's when you're comparing whether you want your child, you're concerned that your child may end up on the shorter side of the population as opposed to average height or tall. Might want to take a look at all the side effects and what these drugs cause, because it's pretty dangerous stuff. We're talking about altering their hormones,
Yeah, and you kind of nailed it earlier with that quote about you were going to look back at this over time, and it's going to be deemed similar to giving kids lobotomies. It's going to be deemed similar to the eugenics programs that were carried out in the 1920s and 30s. And I think that is what it is to a large degree. And your work is really helping to shed light on it. Let's do this. Let's talk about anything you'd like to promote. Of course, the website is corysdigs.com. And you'll see that SGTreport is one of your proud sponsors. At the top of the page there, you show our logo along with others who support your fine work. So tell people a little bit about the best ways to find you, Twitter, etc.
Yeah, so it's Corey's Digs, COREYSDIGS.com. I'm also on Twitter and YouTube. I do a weekly Dig It podcast with the speaker and the Sharp Edge, who I love dearly, and they are from Hive Mind. And I'm on Patreon, so anyone who would like to support me, I'd greatly appreciate it so I can continue this work. And also, anyone who wants to do their own fact-checking and research. I've written articles on how to dig. I have tons of resources and tools and background search database, and in my For Diggers page, as well as the file drawer, tons of declassified files. And so I'm not competitive. I want people to be able to do their own research and find this out for themselves while we're also all trying to expose as much as we can. We can never have too many diggers, right?
100% right. All right. Well, like I say, we're all in this mess together. And, when the apparatus, the corporate apparatus, the global apparatus, the NGOs, the Soros organizations, which I think at this point include most of the liberal media, CNN, MSNBC, when that entire apparatus is turned against we the people, then it is we are the news now, Corey. And I mean,
absolutely,
give credit to Q for that one. He's right over the target. We are the news now. And that's what scares the hell out of them. It really does. Because if you take a look at the Wall Street Journal, if you take a look at all of these online forms of propaganda, take a look at their subscriber numbers. They've been nosediving now for the past 5 years, for the past decade. Newspapers are dying. It's a joke. We are the news now.
And don't you find it interesting that they're talking about dropping the OIG report on the 9th, and then YouTube comes out and says that they're going to start changing their policies on the 10th?
Yeah, not commercially viable, huh? Yeah, well, I know. I just talked about that in a recent interview. We're going to have to keep our eye on that very, very closely. So YouTube has backed off a little bit with one of their statements saying, oh, no, you guys just misinterpreted that. This isn't going to change anything day to day for YouTube channels. But, I believe them about as far as I can spit. So.
Right.
All right. Well, Corey, thanks so much for your time today. I very much appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. It's, you know what, you have a great platform and you do fantastic work. So I appreciate you letting me get this information out.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for taking the time today. All right. And guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We very much appreciate you as well. And if you like this information, please give it a like and share it within your sphere of influence on social media and with family, colleagues, friends. And for real news 24/7, you can visit us directly at SGTreport.com, the corporate propaganda antidote. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. God bless. Bye-bye.
What does it mean when you give up your genetic code? Did everyone read the fine print for 23andMe? Are you giving the rights away? All I'm telling you is I don't think that's a good idea. And when you show who owns it, I really don't think it's a good idea.